Welcome back, everybody. So, as I promised you, this playlist is progressive, meaning all of the videos are building on each other. And so far in this playlist, we covered a lot. I think we covered most of the Swift language, but we started way back when with some basic types. We looked at strings and booleans. Then we learned how to use tuples. Tuples are how we can combine multiple pieces of data into one piece of data. Then we looked at how we can actually create custom types. Custom types can have a bunch of pieces of data inside them. But we have one problem remaining, and it's that what if we wanted to have a collection of any of those? So if we wanted to have a collection of strings or a collection of classes, and by collection, I mean basically like a list, like one object that's going to hold a whole bunch of these. So maybe I have one list of 50 Booleans, right? And so in code, we use something called arrays. Arrays are basically like lists. They literally have an order, and you put the objects in the array in an order. And so in this video, we're going to look at how we can create arrays and then how we can actually work with them. So once data is in an array, there's actually a bunch of methods that we can use to like count how many items are in the array and access the different items that are in the array. And so to access those items, we need to understand indexes. So arrays have indexes, and it's basically the order where the item is in that list. And so in this video, we're going to do a bunch of examples of how to actually work with those indexes. Because as I will mention in the video, I think almost every screen you'll probably ever create has some sort of array or collection of data on it. This is incredibly common across all apps, across probably every screen. So we really need to understand what is happening when we are working with these collections. We're going to wrap up this video looking at sets. Sets are very similar to arrays, except they're unique. So what that means is array might have multiple of the same piece of data, whereas a set cannot have multiple of the same piece of data. Sets are way less common than arrays, at least in my experience, so we're not going to spend a ton of time on them, but I think it's important that you at least get a little glimpse of what a set can do. So without further ado, let's jump into the code and learn about arrays. Welcome back, everyone. We are, I would say, over the hump in this playlist. We have done the hardest stuff by far. The next couple videos, probably about 5 videos left. They're going to be just taking this down into the finish line. Think of this as this was a marathon. We are in the final stretch. The couple things that we're going to do here are basically kind of playing with some of the data types that we have created in the last couple of videos. So we already now know how to make functions. We know how to make structs, classes, enums. And we're just going to kind of manipulate some of that data for some maybe more real world use cases that we actually will have in our app. And so the first thing we're going to look at is what's called an array. And an array is a collection of data points. So previously, in like the last video of the access control, we created movie 1 and movie 2 and movie 3, but we kept all 3 of these separate. If we want to now combine all 3 of these into one collection, we would use an array. And so that's what we're going to look at now. So let's right click the navigator, create a new playground page. Let's call this arrays. I'm going to delete some of this code here. And just really quickly, we are looking at arrays, but we will also take a quick look at sets. I'll explain the difference, but we're going to mostly work with arrays because arrays are much, much more common in actual apps. Sets are really cool. They're really powerful. And when you're learning to code, sets seem incredibly important, but at least in my experience, they're way less common in real apps. So I think I really want to focus on arrays in this video. There are other collection types such as dictionaries, and we're going to cover that in the next video. So firstly, what is an array? So in the previous videos, we created data, something like this. We would say var, my title of type string, and set it equal to a string of maybe hello world. And then we could create another one called my title 2 of type string and set it equal to maybe something else, hello world again. And so now in my code, I can reference title 1 and I can reference title 2, but I don't have a way to actually combine both of these so I can reference them together. So these 2 pieces of data are completely separate. We have my title and my title 2, right?
And what if we want in our app to pass these around as a collection, pass them around together? Well, there are a couple ways we could do it with things that we've already learned. For example, we could create a tuple. So I could create a function to do something, and maybe I want to pass in a value that has both of these. I can say, I'll just call it value, that is a tuple of type string, string. And maybe I'll give these parameter names of like title1 and title2. So now when I call do something, I can pass in a tuple. So one piece of data that has both title1 and title2. So I can do like this, my title and my title2. That works. This is a tuple, but this is not very scalable. What if we had like 100 titles? This would not really work. Alternatively, we could either create like a struct or a class. So in the last couple of videos, we would create something like a struct that is maybe titles model. And we could have in here, we could have maybe, let's say, let title1 of type string and let title2 of type string. And then we could create another function. So here I'll say custom data model, because we could do this with a struct or a class, right? And then we can have another function called to do something where we pass in a titles model. And now I can call do something, and I can pass in a titles model. And that will have my title as well as my title2. So again, this works. But again, we have a problem if we want to scale this up, right? If there was 100 titles, I don't want to have to type this out 100 times. That's going to get ridiculous. And so the solution to this is by using a collection. Specifically, we're going to use an array. So let's look at the syntax a little bit. I'm going to put a comment here just to break up the code here. I'm going to say let apple of type. I'm going to say let apple, and I'll set it equal to a string that says apple. And I'll say let orange, and I'll set it equal to a string that says orange. And now we're going to create an array called fruits, which will be of type, and we're going to use the square brackets here, which we have not used yet. So these square brackets indicate an array. And then inside the square brackets, we're going to give it what type of data is going to be in this array. So obviously here we have a string, right? These are strings. So this array is going to be an array of strings. So a bunch of strings lined up in an order. So in here, this will be of type array of string. And then I'm going to set it equal to an array. And so I can in here actually just create my array. I can create apple and I can create orange. And you'll notice that I separated the items with a comma. So an array is an ordered list of items. So this is the first item, this is the second item. And now we can add on as many items as we want into this array. And when we pass it around our app now, we will pass in, we'll do something with a value that literally could be an array of string. So now we pass in a whole bunch of strings as one single collection. I'm going to just show you another way we could have written this. We could have said let fruits of type array of string, set it equal to, we'll add in apple and orange. So this apple referencing this and orange representing this constant. Let's call this fruits2 because we already have this fruits1 in code here. And another way to write this, so this is again of type array of string. We can have let fruits3 of type array with a generic type of string. And I can set that equal to the exact same thing. So this is another way to write this. This approach is much more common. So this is what you're going to see in almost every tutorial online. You can write it like this. This is what's called a generic, but that's something that I'm not even going to talk about in this playlist. It's much more advanced in the Swift language. For now, I would write it like this and just know that if you ever see something that looks kind of like this, well, this means it's an array and this is the type of data that is in that array. All right, of course, arrays are not limited to strings. So we could have let maybe my bools and set it equal to an array of booleans, true, false, true, 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 false, right? And now we have an array of booleans. So this is of type array of bool. Once we have an array, it opens us up to doing a lot of really cool stuff with it. So for example, let's create another fruits array. I'm going to put it down here. Let's call this, just call it fruits array. And maybe I'll add in a couple more here. I'm going to add in banana, and maybe I'll add in mango as well. All right, so in my code, once I have this fruits array, I can now get some data from this array. So for example, if I pass this around my app, maybe I was curious how many items are inside this array. So right now we can see that it is 1, 2, 3, 4. But when we're running the program, we don't know how many will actually be in there because maybe it got edited. So I can come down here and say let count equal fruits array dot count. And that's literally going to give us the number of items in this array. So this count should be 1, 2, 3, 4. Go ahead and run. Great. We can also do something like let first item equals fruits array dot first. Or we could do last item is fruits array dot last. And I can run this. And so the first item is apple, the last item is mango. So I will point out here that the first, if we look at the first or the last, and I hold the option button and click on this, we can see that it's an optional string. And that's because the compiler doesn't know how many items are actually in this fruits array. It could be 0. It could be more than 0. And so when we call first, it is quite literally an optional string, because if this was empty, then obviously the first item is nil. So this is like one use case where we might want to do some sort of if let first item equals fruits array dot first. And now in this closure, we can use the first item, right? We use our if let statement to unwrap the value, the first value of the fruits array. In a similar fashion, we could use a guard statement. I'm not going to go into that. We already covered optionals and guards. But this is just one place where that's starting to come into play. All right, I'm going to come up here and I'm going to delete banana and mango. And so maybe our fruits array starts just like this. And then when our code runs, we want to add banana and mango to the array. How would we go and add to the array? Well, we could do something like this where we set fruits array equal to the current value of fruits array plus an additional array. So maybe we want to add in an array of banana. And then I'll print out down here the fruits array. All right, so when I go to run this, firstly, it's going to not compile, obviously. This warning is telling us that we cannot append to fruits array because fruits array is a let constant. Now, if we go back to the object-oriented programming video in this playlist, I talked about items that are in the stack and items that are in the heap. And items in the stack, strings, booleans, integers, structs, when we edit those, they actually get mutated. Another item that is in the stack is an array. And so when we edit the array, we're actually creating a new version of it. The contrary, if it was in the heap, like the class, we could create the class and then edit the data inside. So again, when we were editing our structs, right, we were creating a variable and then editing that variable to a new mutated version of it. When we were creating classes, we created a constant of this instance of this class. Then we went inside and changed the data in it. Now when we are back to editing our array here, right now it's a let, but we can't edit it. So we need to make it a var. So this is acting much more like the struct, and I can run this now, and of course it's going to work. So I can see down here that fruits array is now equal to the original fruits array plus an array of banana as well. And if I wanted to, I could add in mango here and just add both of these to the array at the same time. This works, but this is generally not how we actually add items to an array. Arrays have special methods that we're going to look at now. So the first one is called append. So I'm going to call here as fruits array dot append. Now, append means add the item at the end of the array. So if this is the beginning, this is then the end. So after orange, I will append and add another item. So here there's two options, append new element, and I'm going to append a banana. And then let's run this, and we can see that banana was added. After we append that, let's do it again and append mango. And then that should work as well. All right, alternatively, if we wanted to append them both at the same time, we would call fruits array dot append, and we can append contents of. So we can append an array like we did here to the existing array. So I'm going to paste in here an array of both banana and mango. So both of these will get appended to the end at the exact same time. And of course, it says banana and mango again. Perfect. So right now we are printing out the full fruits array, but what if I wanted to just access the first element? I can call fruits array dot first, and that will give me the first item. But there is no fruits array dot second. And there's no third, there's no fourth, there's no fifth. So unless I'm getting the first or the last, there's no way like this to access this item, this second item. Or now that we have this full array of 4 items, right? How do I access just the banana item? Well, we do that using something called a subscript. So on the fruits array, I can open up these square brackets, and this is accessing a subscript of the array. And inside this square brackets, it's basically, we need to tell it which index of the array do we want to access. I started talking about this in an earlier video, but the way indexes work are, so if you have a collection, so here we have a collection of, or actually it's down here, we have a collection of 4 items, right? So if we were to count these items, this would be number 1, number 2, number 3, number 4. So the count would go 1, 2, 3, 4, just like you would actually count in real life. However, if we're looking at the indexes of these items start at 0. So this would be 0, 1, 2, and 3. 0, 1, 2, 3. And this goes on obviously forever. So the count is always 1 above what the index is. And that's because the index starts at 0, the count starts at 1. So when I call fruitsArray.count, it's doing the regular count. But if I ask for the fruitsArray.the last index is going to be this and not this. So if we do that really quickly, I can say let first index equals, I can access the fruitsArray.indices. So this we can see here is a range of integers. So the indices is going to go from 0 all the way to whatever the maximum, the last index is. So indices, we can look for the first index, and then alternatively, we can do the last index. And here we're going to do the last. So if we do this right, the first index is 0, the last index is 3. Let's run this real quick. And there we have it. It's coming out 0 and 3. So the last index or the count are different numbers. And we need to know that those things are different. So sometimes in code, you're going to work with indexes, and sometimes you're going to work with the count. Now, let's go back to what we were looking at here with this fruits array. If we want to access an item at where the banana is, this is now the third item in the array, which would be the 0, 1, 2, the second index. So if I put the number 2 here, we are accessing the item at the second index inside the fruits array. If I run this, we can see that this is going to be banana, right? So if I do the first index, that should be orange. And I put that here, orange. If I look at the first item in the array, that should be index 0. And I should put that here. Now, it's incredibly important when we are working with arrays that we understand that this subscript is not safe. So if we access an index that is not actually in the array, so for example, the last index here is 3. If I were to put in 4 and I run this, it's going to actually crash the application. And that's because we are accessing an index that is not in the bounds of the array. So the array has 0 up to 3, and we're trying to get an item at 4, and that's dangerous. That's going to crash our app. So sometimes in code, you might see me write something like this. If fruits array dot indices dot contains, so if it contains index number 4, then we can access let item equals fruits array at number 4. So this is the one way to basically check if that index does exist before you actually access it. Generally, we should only ever be accessing an array index directly if we are absolutely sure that there is a value at that index. Because if it's not, it's going to crash our application. All right, so now that we actually understand how indexes work, I will run this just to make sure it's not crashing our code here. So we have this array. And what if we want to add an item in between orange and banana? So we learned about append. Append's going to add an item to the end of the array. Let's do that one more time. We're going to call fruits array dot append, and maybe we append watermelon. And let's move our print statement real quick down below this append. And if I run this, we know it's going to add watermelon at the end of the array. But what if I want to add watermelon in between orange and banana? Well, now I can actually call fruits array dot insert, and I can insert this new element at an index. So we just learned about indexes. So this is index 0, 1, and 2. So if I insert an element of watermelon at index 2, it should put it 0, 1 right here where index 2 would be. And it will push banana out to index 3. So let's try that real quick. Let's run it. We can see the watermelon is now at index 2. Similarly, we can call fruits array dot insert, and we can insert contents of. So we can insert an array of items. So if I want to add watermelon, and maybe I also want to add, I don't know, tangerine, I can add both of these at the same time to index 2. And let's go ahead and run this. And now they're both inserted at the same time. The opposite of insert is remove. So I can also call fruits array dot remove at, and I can remove an item at an index. So now my array looks like this. I have index 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So maybe I want to remove the tangerine. So this is going to be index 3. So if I remove the item at index 3, I will run this again and we'll see that tangerine is no longer in my array. So I removed the item at 3. So again, these are indexes. If I access index 100, we know that does not exist in the array. And so if I run this, it's going to crash the application. So again, when we're working with arrays, we need to be very careful that if we are accessing an item at an index, we need to make sure that an item does exist at that index. And we can do that by checking it like this. So here I might want to say if fruits array that indices contains index 1, then I remove item at index 1 or something like that. There are many, many ways that you can write this code. This is not, you don't have to do this every single time. Just trying to get you guys familiar with how arrays work. One final thing I'll just throw out here is we can call fruits array dot remove all. And of course, that is going to remove all of the items from the array. I'm going to wrap up here with a couple final things. Firstly, obviously our arrays right now are strings or booleans. But now that we know how to create custom types, we can create our own types as well and make arrays of those. So if I created a struct called maybe a product, I have a product model in my app, and every product has a title of type string. Every product has a price of type integer. I can now create an array called my products. That is an array of product model. So I can put in product 1, price maybe 50, and I can put these on separate lines. In between the items of the array, I need to add a comma, and then I can add another one. So I'm just going to copy and paste this. Maybe I have product 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. I can scale this up to infinity. Arrays can take as many pieces of data as you want. and they can all be different. They can all be the same. It doesn't really matter. All right, so here I have an array of products. This will be written as an array of product model. The last thing I will touch on is the main difference between a set and an array. So let's revert back to our fruits array. Where is our fruits array? I'm going to create another version of this fruits array. Let's just call this final fruits, which is an array of string. And in this array, I'm going to put an apple, an orange, let's add a banana, and let's add another apple. So there are 2 apples in this array. If I print out final fruits, I can see there is an apple and there's an apple. So we can have duplicate of the same exact item in an array. But now let's create a set. So I'm going to say var, let's call this fruits set. And it will be of type a set that contains strings. So just like up here, the technical way to write an array is using array with a generic type of string. Down here, we are using a set with a generic type of string. And if I set this equal to the exact same array, and then I print out the fruits set, you're going to notice that in the fruits set, apple does not appear twice. And that's because sets are unique values. You cannot have 2 of the same item in a set. That's kind of the whole purpose. Everything is going to be unique. So if I know in my app that I'm going to have multiple of the same item, then I definitely need to use an array. But if I want to make these items unique, so I only care if there's one version of each of these items, now I can use a set. The second thing that is incredibly important about the difference between these, if you notice here, when we created the final fruits, apple was first, orange was second, banana was third, apple was fourth, right? But when we created this fruit set, they were in the same order, but when they printed out, they were in a different order. Orange was first. We never made orange first, but it printed out as first. And that's because sets do not have an order. So where the fruits array had indexes and the items are always listed in the exact same order, in a set, the items are not listed in the exact same order. So there's some fundamental differences. There are more things that we can do with sets that we cannot do with arrays. But the long story short is that most of the code you're going to write for the next probably year, most of the collections in applications are arrays or dictionaries and not sets. Sets are incredibly powerful. They're just way less common for a variety of reasons that I'm not really going to get into now. So most of the time we're going to use arrays, but we will also use a lot of dictionaries. And the next video in this series, we're going to dive into dictionaries. So I hope this was a good introduction to what arrays are. They are incredibly powerful. It's a great way to basically have a list of many items. So we could hold like 50 of the same exact type in one array and then pass that around our application. Later in the series, we're also going to look at looping on arrays. So we're going to look at how we can actually manipulate this data even further. Right now, we just appended and inserted and removed items, but there's a lot more we can do here, such as filtering and sorting. We're going to get into that in a future video. All right, now you guys are super familiar with arrays, and in the next video, we're going to check out dictionaries. Thank you guys for watching. As always, I am Nick. This is Swiftful Thinking, and I'll see you in the next video.